I'm Ann Gaviola. Welcome to the Peak on Global, where we break down what's trending in the business world and what you need to know to stay ahead of the curve. Joining me today is Jay Rosenthal from the Peak podcast. Brett is off today. Welcome, Jay.
Yeah, Brett is off. We gave him the day off.
We do that sometimes. Okay, let's start our conversation this week with inflation. It's kind of the story that everyone can't help but talk about all the time. So we have the latest snapshot of the cost of living from Statistics Canada. It shows inflation in June hit an annual rate of 8.1%, the highest level in, let's call it, 40 years. What are your thoughts, Jay?
It hurts, right? It does drive conversation almost across the board because it impacts so much in the economy. And there is some interesting news that we're hopeful about, or we've been talking about on the Peak Daily. We're calling them silver linings. One is about gas prices, which have come down, and the housing market, especially in places like Toronto, have cooled off a bit. Those are two encouraging signs that we're looking at, and we do like to call them silver lining, but it doesn't feel like a silver lining if you're paying, 8.1% more for nearly everything. But gas prices were driving a huge chunk of that, and they are down. I think it's about 25 cents a liter week over week. So we're really feeling that those are coming down, which is great because people are hitting the roads for sure because they're worried about what's happening at the airport.
Yeah, when we talk about that 8.1%, though, that's kind of across the board. It's an average. When you look at the price of gas, it jumped about 55% in June compared to that time last year. It is so tricky to predict, but the number one question that I get asked is, when are we going to get some relief? You mentioned this, and we do know that the price of gas has come down this month, so that is something, considering gas made up such a big chunk of what was driving inflation. But there are so many wild cards, like Russia's invasion of Ukraine, obviously, boosting global oil and food prices, and also another kind of seasonal thing, hurricane season. Like, who knows what's going to happen there? And I do want to remind everyone, Jay, when we talk about relief, that doesn't mean that prices are going to stop climbing. It just means that they're going to stop maybe skyrocketing, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're called the peak, but not for this reason. But hopefully, and there were some economists predicting this week, that this might be the peak. Now, I'm loath to predict the peak of anything, especially when well-known economists who write for the New York Times have been apologizing for sort of making light of what inflation may come. But it doesn't feel great for sure. But if we are nearing the peak or at the peak, that is good news for sure. But again, it'll take some time for all of us to feel it in our pocketbooks. We might feel it most urgently at the gas pump. It might take a little bit longer to feel it through the rest of the economy.
Yeah, the head of Canada's central bank has said, hang on and brace for, inflation to stay high for a good long time. I have it on some pretty decent authority from some of my economist interviews that we could see the peak sometime at the end of this summer. I know that's very ballpark. Let's switch gears here a little bit and talk about BMO's top economist, Doug Porter. He put out a short note on Wednesday. It was kind of an I told you so, saying that rock bottom interest rates were the main culprit in fueling the pandemic housing frenzy versus kind of our go-to when we talk about housing here in Canada and what ails it, which is supply shortage. And his proof, he looked at what happened in towns, specifically in southern Ontario, where demand and prices soared when rates were ultra low. And then as soon as rates started climbing and there were jumbo-sized rate hikes, cooled immediately. What do you think of this, Jay? And actually, before you get into what you think about this, I should ask, are you a renter or a homeowner? We know that Brett is a renter, and I think that changes a little bit in terms of the lens that he looks through this topic with.
It is. I am an owner in downtown Toronto, and my home happens to be construction right now. So interest rates are certainly top of mind for me. And I don't think it has to be sort of A or B. It doesn't necessarily have to be the housing crunch was fueled by low interest rates or the lack of supply. I would choose A. I would choose one from column A and one from column B are the challenges that we have been facing in Canada. Now, interest rates are going up. The housing market is cooling down. I don't think that means we should just do nothing around housing. We do have a shortage of supply. It's to the tune of millions and millions of homes we need to build. Where we need to build them, how they get built is sort of the question that all levels of government are tackling. The federal government made major investments, and we're talking about in Ontario this week, the major driver for the premier and the province to want strong mayors in Toronto and Ottawa is to actually drive housing. So it does have impacts across sort of life in Canada. But again, I don't think it's necessarily just because low interest rates or just because lack of supply. I think it's probably a bit of both. And we will see as time goes on. But I do think it's not A or B, but maybe A and B.
Absolutely. And to be clear, Doug Porter is saying it is A and B. But if you had to look at the one that is kind of the bigger driver, it would be, surprise, surprise, some of that FOMO and some of that kind of excitement related to those ultra low interest rates. And it's worth noting, I have to bring this up, the housing supply shortage is most pronounced in Ontario compared to other provinces and territories. And when you look at housing supply per capita, Canada's ranking is at the bottom of the G7 when you compare us to other kind of peer countries. So this is something that was an issue pre-COVID. It remains an issue now, though, right, Jay?
It absolutely does. And again, we do have a well-known shortage of supply across economic sectors, right? It's not just low-income housing or medium-income housing or high. It's across the board, and it needs urgent action. And I think we're getting to a point now that we're actually seeing some urgent action take place, certainly from the top down and the bottom up, in terms of sort of levels of government. And that's encouraging to see. It's still daunting goals lie ahead to how you actually build all this housing stock to meet not only our sort of increasing population here, but also the population we want to also welcome to Canada, whether they be refugees or immigrants from other countries that we want to be here, to live here, to become Canadian and live and work and help us thrive here. So it is a daunting task that we will have to tackle as a country, as a province, as a city, across the board. So while interest rates may fluctuate, the need for housing certainly is not.
Absolutely. And I've always said this, hockey is a kind of a national pastime, but so is talking about housing. Let's put a pause on that one, though, and talk about the rally in Tesla shares. And that happened this week because of better than expected earnings. Kind of a big deal when you consider this is the most shorted stock of any publicly traded company. I think about 3% of its float is held in short positions. I want to ask you, Jay, what are your thoughts on Tesla as a company? And can we even separate that out from your thoughts on Elon Musk?
We're going to have to separate the two out because I think I have different thoughts on both. Because I think Tesla's a super innovative company, driving the market, really driving innovation and driving demand for electric vehicles. So much so that my 9-year-old wants a Tesla, but not the normal one, but the one open like this. So it's permeated all kinds of everybody and people's imagination, but also people do love driving them. So as a car company, as someone driving innovation, I think it's really difficult to sort of take shots at that. At the same time, on the screen talking about sort of their holdings of Bitcoin, and it's hard to separate Tesla, Bitcoin, and Elon Musk because they all are intertwined. And so when you talk about Elon Musk's leadership, it's really difficult to take away his leadership of Tesla and SpaceX and what would have been Twitter, because it's very difficult, I find at times, to separate what he's saying on Twitter versus what he's saying to investors versus what he's doing when he's running a company. So much so that when he was talking about them shedding Bitcoin and improving their cash position, he said that it was not don't take it as a verdict on Bitcoin. Yet when they bought all that Bitcoin and started accepting Bitcoin, it was okay to accept it as a verdict on Bitcoin.
That's
that
right.
They were diving into it. So it's very difficult to say we should take it as a verdict when they buy it, but not when they sell it. So take that as you will, but it's difficult. And Elon Musk is hard to pin down on these things. And so I'm okay separating Tesla as a car company versus Elon Musk leadership thereof.
Elon Musk, richest man in the world, talks out of both sides of his mouth. We're probably going to have to leave it there, but though I will say your 9-year-old and what they think about all of this, it's a small sample size, but a very mighty one, I think. Thank you so much for your time and your insight, Jay.
You got it. Thanks so much.
Okay. And you can get all your daily business news with the Peak Daily Podcast. It's available for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts.